So I want you to picture this. It looks like a rat mixed with a beaver, and it could wreak havoc on Ontario's ecosystem. Brace yourselves for what we're about to show you. It's called the nutria. Look at those teeth. Wow. It is one of 10 new animals and plants added to the province's the province's invasive species list. Another one on the list is a lobster-like creature that apparently reproduces by cloning. Joining me with more on all of this is Colin Casson. He is the invasive species policy manager at the Invasive Species Centre. I've never seen anything like that thing.
Aren't they interesting? It's something out of a terrible science fiction novel, but they're not here yet, so the more we can do to prevent their spread and establishment, the better.
Okay, so what are they? Nutria.
Oh, so nutria, think a little bit smaller than a beaver, bigger than a muskrat, those real interesting looking front chompers there. The big differentiating feature would be the rat-like tail. So you've got the big flat beaver tail on a beaver. These nutria here, again, not here yet, so we don't expect to see them, but if they do establish, we'd be looking for that rat-like tail. No hair on it, not nice looking.
How big are they?
About 20 to 30 pounds, depending on the age and size. But, you know, again, a little bit smaller than a beaver. Imagine in your mind a little bit bigger than a muskrat.
So when you're looking at this picture, is this like a flattering picture? Or I don't know if you can see what we're seeing.
You know, whatever you are, lean into it. And that's what the nutria is doing here.
So you say they're not here yet. So where are they?
Really close. Canada-wide, the closest population would be kind of the northern part of Washington state, so real close to our western neighbors in BC. From an East Coast perspective and in Ontario, really we're looking at Illinois being the closest population. They're not going to crawl here their own very quickly, but again, invasive species move in different ways, and unfortunately sometimes humans can be the best facilitators of invasive species. So we want to regulate them now, have them on this Invasive Species Act regulations, and prevent their introduction and establishment.
And why are we so concerned about this animal?
You know, nutria in particular, it's their feeding habits. They punch holes in wetland vegetation. And if you know anything about wetlands, you know that the soil is wet, sloppy, moves around, and what keeps it in place, what keeps those shorelines stable, it's about the plant community. So nutria like to burrow down, eat roots, and ultimately have negative impacts on how stable our shorelines are. Why is that important? Because roads, bridges, important and costly infrastructure pieces happen to be right beside wetlands. So if nutria establish, they could be a threat to biodiversity and also our infrastructure and economy more broadly.
I've never seen anything like that, Colin. And their little hands, too. All right, let's move on to these two crayfish also made it onto the list. And even though they're obviously very different from the nutria, oh, here we are. The ecosystem risks they present are kind of similar. So what can you tell us about them?
Yeah, again, the crayfish leaning into it. So marbled crayfish is one species that's now regulated under these Invasive Species Act, and you led with it. The cloning aspect of the reproduction is really the big challenge. With most species, they reproduce sexually. So mama and papa getting together, and there we go. With these guys, they reproduce clonally, and that's the big problem here, is that releasing just one from an aquarium into a stormwater pond or a municipal pond or something like that, any water body, can all of a sudden have an exponential population growth, which is really the challenge. Now, what do? They burrow into our shoreline. So similar enough to actually what nutria do and how they threaten our wetlands. Both of these crayfish species can burrow into shorelines and ultimately just have shorelines that are collapsing and have, again, that kind of what we're looking for is healthy, well-vegetated shorelines that can reduce movement of soil into water. And so these guys are a challenge against that.
Last, I want to ask you about restrictions been placed on a plant known as the Tree of Heaven. Despite its name, it is one of the most concerning entries. What is this plant capable of?
So it's an invasive tree in its own right, but really the big challenge with Tree of Heaven is that it facilitates the establishment of another invasive species, a top priority species. It's called the spotted lanternfly. It's a beautiful looking insect, and this tree is critical to the establishment of spotted lanternfly. A spotted lanternfly is a problem. We're kind of indirectly attacking spotted lanternfly by reducing Tree of Heaven and regulating it. Why is it an issue? It feeds on grapes, hops, all important agricultural products that we have in Ontario, especially in that Niagara and Prince Edward County region. Really important to our economy. And so spotted lanternfly is a real big threat to that. So if we can knock out Tree of Heaven, it gives us a running start on addressing that new priority invasive species.
Colin Casson, absolutely fascinating this morning. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you liked this, be sure to subscribe here, or you can check out more Your Morning videos right here.